now for about a decade. And as we continue to do this work, we want to amplify and promote the voices of Brown and Black people in our communities, making sure promote the voices of Brown and Black people in our communities, making sure that we elevate these issues that we deal with in our communities. Tonight is one of those issues which is on all of our minds, which is violence in our community, and making sure that we are proactive and making sure that we tackle the issue that's going on. And so with that said, let's just jump right into the conversation. This is one that I am very engaged in and interested in, and we are very blessed to have a person that Justice Amion has been working with for many years, Mr. Ernest Johnson of Ubuntu Village, NOLA, that is a part of this panel on tonight, along with Tanise Williams and also Dr. Vegno, who have been working on some tremendous projects around prevention and intervention of crime or violence, I'll say. And so with that said, we're going to hop right into it. And I'm going to ask that each one of our presenters would introduce themselves and tell us let me just pose it this way. What brings you to this work, and why is this this moment in our state, in our city, an urgent and significant time for you to be engaged in this work? What makes it so vital that we step it up, if you will, or that you continue doing what you do? So just tell us, Mr. Ernest Johnson, what you're working on and why you're involved in this work, and what makes this a critical moment right now.
Thank you, Pastor. So most of you all know we have been working with young people and their families who are impacted by the criminal justice system. So about 6 months ago, I was invited to meet with Dr. Vegno and a number of other stakeholders from the city to discuss how can we look at the community violence that is happening here in New Orleans, and how can we recreate what Dr. Jennifer Vegno calls it an ecosystem around reducing violence in our specific community. And because we had working with families and young people who are touched by the criminal justice system, it was always a sort of an aftermath of after they have gotten in trouble or were a victim or a perpetrator of violence. We found that we were acting as responders. So when this opportunity presented itself, we thought we would take advantage of it to do more prevention work and get in front of it before it occurs, because too often there's too much harm and too many people are hurt by these specific incidents, and then we come along and try to support them. So that's what kind of brought me to this work today.
All right. Thank you, Ernest, for that.
And Pastor, I would like to make a note. Dr. Jen is running a little late, but in the absence, one of her colleagues is on. If she's too late for you all, she can step in, but she should be here in the next 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm just about to transition from my car to my house so I can get on my computer. I'm sorry, everybody. I'll be up in just a sec.
All right. Take your time. Take your time. We'll be waiting for you, but no hurry. All right, and I always forget to introduce myself. So, Pastor Gregory T. Manning, pastor of Justice and Beyond, pastor of Broadmoor Community Church, where no perfect people are allowed, and co-moderator for Justice and Beyond. Tanise Williams, welcome. Thank you for being here tonight. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, your organization, and what brings you to this work, and why is it a critical moment right now?
Greetings, everyone. Great evening. I am Tanise Williams, Executive Director of Feed the Second Line. Our organization, what we do is, our mission is to create a stronger safety net and job opportunities for the culture bearers in our city. So that's your Masking Indians, your baby dolls, second liners, and musicians. And so when I talk about creating a stronger safety net. For us, that's a broad of things, whether it's assistance, whether it's through helping with climate change, or right now we have this greater need. We want to make sure that we're on the front lines partnering with organizations like Mr. Ernest's organization to make sure that we can actually help be a pillar in the community to help curb the violence that's going on. When you think about the culture bearers are members of the community, right? And in that sense, they're also ambassadors of the community as well. So being able to partner with an organization to actually let those culture bearers' voice be heard, and not just in the sense of in the name of the culture, but in the name of the community. What brings me to this work? Well, number one, I am a New Orleans native, so I am a part of the community, but also I am a mother of 3 young Black sons. And my children were involved in the culture from a younger age. The older 2 are in college now, and I also have a 12-year-old. So I was able to see firsthand how culture actually plays a role with keeping the attention of the youth per se. Mind you, they're still being able to be kids, but being actively involved in the community on a standpoint from a culture bearer, and also be able to be a leader for their peers. So about 2 years ago, we did an all youth Black Lives, maybe 3 years ago, I'm sorry. We did an all youth Black Lives Matter march, and it was actually led by my son, whom at the time was 16. So it was a major impact in the community because his peers, he was able to relate to them. So for them to see someone their age actually doing something positive, and it's like, oh, okay, well, that's not lame. Maybe we actually can like get on a bandwagon with him and let's see what they're doing. So it created a space for us to be kind of like a safe haven for especially like the youth within our community, to actually be able to provide resources for them and their families, just to kind of like curb that extra time when we think about the youth of the community, or they don't have enough to do. So just trying to come together on our own to find something for them to do. So to be able to partner with other organizations in the community as a whole, like that's what we need. So everything about this initiative, I support it. Of course, I don't want anyone in my community or anyone in my family to be affected by violence. So whatever we can do, like you said, Pastor, better together, that definitely that's what brings me here. Our city is so unique, but we want to make sure that everyone in our city is safe.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Tanise. And I'm so excited that Feed the Second Line is invested in tackling climate change. We know that is a crisis that we're facing in our globe right now, and I would love to talk to you more about that as well too. Sure. Yeah. Dr. Avegno, are you settled yet?
Yes, I am. Sorry about that, everybody. I was running from another meeting. Thanks, y'all, for having me. Thank you, Mr. Johnson, for the invitation. And I do want to call out my colleagues from the city, Dr. Jordan Vaughn, who's a fellow emergency physician with us at the health department. And I see Jonathan Henderson, who's the mayor's policy strategy brains behind some of what we're trying to do. I think the question on the table was, why do you do this work? I'm also a New Orleans native. I'm a New Orleans mom. I care so deeply about this community because it's my community. For the past 20 plus years, I've been an emergency physician at UMC. I trained at Charity Hospital. So when you're an emergency physician, you see the many ways in which we fail our community members, and having taken care in my career of thousands of victims of violence, it's personal for me because every one of those is a neighbor, a friend, a brother, a sister, you name it. And so this is my professional life has dealt with this, but it's also really, really personal for me. And for us, when I came to the health department, 5 years ago, not quite expecting a global pandemic, this was some of the work that I wanted to do with my team. We have a really fantastic team. It is growing. And now I think we're able to have the opportunity to really strengthen the city's commitment to violence prevention and intervention. I think that for a very long time, most people thought that violence prevention was funding the police and giving them more money. And while I have great respect for a lot of the work that our police does, and by and large, they work really hard, we know that that's not the answer. And we know that it's not an either or, that we have to advocate for robust investment in prevention and intervention in things like youth development, in things like mental health, in things like economic stability. And that's the way we're going to achieve lasting peace. And when you're a physician, you know that it's better to prevent than to have to intervene once the disease has progressed. So I'm grateful that we have a lot of partners that we can look to. We have a lot of experts, local experts from the community who can help us to figure out how to invest our resources better. And we now have an administration and a council that is really interested in wanting to put more funding. We cannot do this all at the city. We are dependent on the great work of our partners, and it's got to be every sector. It has to be community organizations, social service organizations, hospitals, the business community, and they've got to be in it for the long haul. So we hope to, and I, whenever we want to talk about kind of our new efforts, I have a little PowerPoint because I am nerdy like that, but hope to just sort of highlight the ways in which we hope to be the convener and the collaborator and to help get the resources to where they're needed the most.
Awesome. Thank you for that. That really lays it out and frames our discussion really well. And certainly we want to see that PowerPoint. I just want to, before we get to that though, that term ecosystem that Mr. Ernest Johnson linked to this discussion and I take as a very significant part of the language that is used in ongoing conversations about this prevention and intervention. It's kind of new to me in this sort of work. What makes that term so significant in terms of the ecosystem that you're wanting to impact? Dr. Avegno?
Yeah, I think that in the past, as we talked about violence prevention, we would say, oh, there's this great new program and it's called Ceasefire, and we're going to do that, and that's going to solve all our problems, right? And, I've worked with Ceasefire Cure Violence from the beginning in New Orleans, and when I tell you they are fantastic, but we were putting the burden of fixing generational ills and stopping violence on 5 or 6 folks who were expected to be everywhere all the time, and that's not realistic, nor is it fair. When we talk about the ecosystem and what it means to me, and I'd love to hear what Ernest has to say, is it is providing multiple services to multiple different individuals and communities, because we recognize that violence prevention takes many different forms. It might be a youth development program. It might be a summer job for one kid. It might be mental health support for another. It might be that direct violence interruption and conflict mediation that's happening in the heat of the moment. Or it may be simply providing folks with the tools that they need to sustain themselves and provide for their basic needs so that they are not at risk of being a victim of violence. So when we started talking about how we would design things better, we wanted to use a term that was very broad and inclusive and gave the idea that, hey, we're not just talking about one program with a grant that's going to expire in 3 years. We're talking about a lot of different things that all have to align together that are going to overlap to provide folks what they need to avoid being a victim of violence. And so that's the ecosystem. It's interruption, it's mental health, it's trauma-informed care. It's a lot of things that we think will work, and we have to fund them accordingly.
And that's brilliant. Ernest, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just lending it to Dr. Jen. She introduced to me and gave me a broader explanation of it. So I'm learning as we go, and we are just one part of that ecosystem. So it's a better understanding that it's going to take all of us and to be part of this at some point, right? To alleviate, violence and prevent it from happening to a lot of people in the city. So I'm following her lead, and she's, giving me some instruction on how this totally works, and also with other partners that she identified on the that are on this call today, also who has been influenced on about making it move in the direction that we want it to go.
All right, thank you. Tanise, you want to add anything to that?
Definitely. I would like to say Dr. Avegno just pretty much nailed it all, but making sure that we're also, and I'm sure you probably said this, but just the piece of like the economic development, like in this process, we're also creating jobs as well. And we know that sometimes, well, for the most part, all the time, poverty plays a major role in violence in our city as well. So in building this system, also creating job opportunities at the same time for members of the community as well.
Absolutely. And doesn't, it goes without saying that housing also plays a huge role. Having safe, secure, healthy living conditions also has an impact on violence as well too, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's all part of the ecosystem. But let's jump in there, and we'd love to see your PowerPoint presentation, Dr. Vegno. If you I don't know if we need to give you sharing capability.
I think you do. I think you need to. And
Kiana,
I promise y'all it's not long, and I'll go through it quickly. I know not everybody loves the PowerPoint, but it helps me get my thoughts together. Let's see.
Background working on giving you sharing capability. Screen sharing.
Yes, I'm doing it right now. Sorry.
Thank you, Kiana.
There we go. Let's see. I think this is it. Let me just figure out how to play. I'm sorry, guys.
Take your time. It's fine.
It's this little Zoom bar that always gets me here. There we go. Okay. So one of the things we set out to do, and it's not just we, this is really happening all over the country, is reframing, when we talk about violence, reframing it as a public health crisis. Number one, because it is, that's not new. It has been for a long time, but I think that changes the conversation. Then it's not all about law enforcement, right? Then we can really talk about evidence and data and what works and what doesn't work, and really understand what the outcomes are we're looking for. And so we're not the only ones, right? The CDC, the American Public Health Association, the American Medical Association, all of these big organizations have come out and said, we need to treat violent injury and death just like we treat diabetes and heart disease and all the other things that kill people. And that's the way that we can move forward. And it also gives, for me being a physician, a healthcare provider, it gives us a role at the table because we see the after effects of this and the physical toll and the emotional toll it takes, and we want to be part of the solution. And so just so we can frame and have an understanding, and I think unfortunately the number I have here has gone up in the last year, but we're talking about tens of thousands of people die every year from violence. So the historic, deep, entrenched inequities in terms of Black rates of homicide versus white. It is now, as I'll show, I think on the next slide, not only a leading cause of death in pregnancy, but it is the leading cause of death in children in America. And you can see that reflected here. This is from the New England Journal of Medicine, which is, probably the most respected journal in the country. And it tracks different causes of death of children over the last 20 plus years. And you can see What used to be the leading cause of death by a huge margin was motor vehicle collisions. But what happened? Collectively, as a society, and with pressure from regulations and business and community groups, we were able to make driving much, much safer. It's still not as safe maybe as an ER doctor would like it, but it's much safer. During that same time period, we did nothing to advance the safety around guns and violence. And so as of the last few years, the number one cause of death in children is firearms. Now, if I said to you the number one cause of death in adults is heart disease, you would say, well, Dr. Avegno, what are you doing to help us be healthy? So we cannot ignore such substantial causes of morbidity and mortality. And then when we look at our own city, even at our lowest murder rate in the last 20 years, we still rank, we are an outlier among a nation of outliers. It is in the top 10 causes of death in New Orleans. And for our Black men, it is nothing short of a crisis, just as stroke and diabetes and kidney disease and all these other things, if not more so. So we cannot continue to ignore this. We know pregnancy is a very high risk condition. Again, our children are at significant risk, and we cannot underscore the risk to our Black men in our community. These are our friends, our neighbors. They are future entrepreneurs and business people and workers, and we are losing them in numbers that is completely unacceptable. And we need to say this over and over again, and we need to show the data so that no one has a question as to what is happening. We also know that it's not just the deaths, even though those are tremendous and traumatic, that for every fatal shooting, we have multiple non-fatal shootings. And that is a lifetime of not only physical, but often emotional and mental trauma. And so again, to ignore this is like ignoring the opioid epidemic, right? We cannot continue to do that. So when we, from that public health lens, when we think about how do we stop this, right? It's, what if I wanted to reduce your blood pressure and thus reduce your risk for heart disease, I would talk to you about various interventions that have been proven to work. And so I want to give you the best evidence-based treatment. There is a lot we don't know about violence, and that's because for decades, there was no funding available to study this problem, right? And that's what academics always want to do. We always want to study the problem, and it is critically important. And the lack of being able to do that has set us back. But I will argue that we can't just wait around for the research studies. We have to understand what has worked, even in small ways in our community or other communities, and start doing it here and doing it in bigger scale. We have the expertise. We have people who have been doing this work for years, who understand our community. And so we need to empower and resource them at a level that we have not done before. So again, we don't want to leave everybody out, because there are countless more organizations that we work with, but these are just a few of who we have been talking to recently and who we want to bring into a really broad coalition to help inform our strategies. We also have to take ownership of this at the city, I think. Even though the city can't do this alone, we have to say this is a priority, just like housing is a priority, just like economic development is a priority, just like Mardi Gras is a priority. We at the city have to say we own this, and we are going to take this on with our partners. So when we looked at where do we need to invest resources to have a broad ecosystem of violence prevention and intervention strategies, we looked to our friends at Tulane and the Vera Institute, who have done very deep analysis of what works other places, what has the potential to work in New Orleans. And these are really broad buckets, but we need, as I said, we have to invest in all of them. And that's where we are trying to do right now with some one-time funding, with city funds, with grants, everything we can do. make investments or support investments in youth development, support our trauma recovery center so that our victims of violence can heal and decrease the likelihood that they will be re-victimized. The violence interrupter programs, both at the hospital and the community, that I know we're going to talk more about. Place-based, what that means is simply reducing blight, cutting grass, painting houses, and putting lights up has a significant role to play in keeping a community safer. And we have to invest that in a really, really strong way. We all come back to poverty reduction. I think that is the number one thing that we can and should be doing. That is the thing that keeps me up at night, because that's the hardest thing to do, is how do you reduce generational poverty for an awful lot of people in a short period of time. But we don't have time to really, think of or spend too much time worrying about it. We have to just get it done. We're trying to make some strides in mental health. And then we do need, we need a thriving, equitable, competent, compassionate law enforcement and criminal justice system. And, I'm not going to argue we're there yet. We also need alternatives to law enforcement. Things like our mobile crisis unit, things like our law enforcement diversion programs, juvenile justice reform. So we need all these things to work together. How are we trying to get it done? Again, I'm really grateful to our administration and our council. They are making investments directly from the city general funds in violence prevention in ways they've never been before. The American Rescue Plan gave us the opportunity to have some pretty substantial funding that at least gives us a couple of years to do some programming. And so we advocated for about a $40 to $50 million package of all kinds of services that through ARPA funds that are rolling out as we speak. We have to do this with the business community and with philanthropy. And whereas I think in the past that maybe hasn't been as receptive, or the funding they wanted to deliver was very minimal and all towards police, I think that we have the attention now of a lot of business and civic folks who understand that we're not going to police our way out of our public health crisis. And then we need to have sustained investments both from the federal and the state. But the work that needs to be done is not necessarily going to be done by the health department. It is going to be done and led by our community organizations who have the deepest knowledge and reach. We can be the advocate and the pass-through and have oversight and make sure everybody is aligning and really working harder and not smarter, not harder. But this needs to be done in the communities by folks that are trusted messenger. And we have to spend a lot of money doing it. When we look around the country at other cities, they spend $20 to $60 per capita per year on violence prevention and intervention. For us, that's anywhere from $8 to $20 million a year. That's never been done before in New Orleans. We are not there this year, but we are a lot farther along than we were. And we're going to keep pushing until we fund human services as robustly as we need to make a difference. In terms of how our office is going to be restructured, the violence prevention efforts at the city have sort of taken different forms of the last year. We are excited that the administration sees this as a public health crisis, and so it's going to be housed in the health department with a director who is going to oversee our domestic violence work, and we've done a lot of things there, published a lot of reports, and have some programs that are starting to make a difference. And then the gun violence unit. And again, it's very small. It's not a whole lot of people. We don't want to spend taxpayer money on, people at City Hall. But what these positions will do will be making sure that the money is getting to our community partners, like Ubuntu, like Center for Restorative Approaches. I see Troy on the call, like our hospital partners who are doing the interruption and the trauma recovery work, making sure we're getting philanthropic money to do community events and engagement, and just making sure that everything is coordinated. So we need everybody. And like I said, I'm a New Orleans native. I've been around a long time, so it's real easy to get pessimistic. But I think that I have not seen the level of investment and interest and real genuine desire to do something different as I have. So I'm excited to have such great partners in the work, and I will stop.
You're on mute, Pastor.
Can y'all hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Okay. All right. I don't know what happened there. Anyway, okay. There was a lot in there. I'm going to ask Tanise, and again, thank you, Dr. Vegno, for that tremendous presentation. I want to just ask Ernest and Tanise, when we hear that presentation and all that's in there, and for the participants, what is just like one major thing that you want folks to hear and to take away from that in this moment right now? Tanise? I don't know if that's because there was so much there, but what I just want them to hear what you zero in on.
Well, one thing I definitely would like for folks to take away is that there is a plan that is now put in place that we are ready to execute. But more importantly, now the community is going to be involved. Our voice is going to be heard because, as Dr. Vegno say, like, we are the messengers, like we are the connectors. So just in knowing that there's a plan that's in place, right? That's a plan that's ready to be executed, but it's going to take all of us to do it. And one thing for sure, like, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take some time. We're going to have to put the work in, but we know that there's a plan in place, and together we can actually execute it and make it happen. So the best part about that there will be counseling. They'll be able to attack mental health. Like, we struggle with mental health within the community. Sometimes, like, community members are not even aware. Even like with the youth, like, you may hear someone say, oh, that kid is just bad, when that kid may not be bad. That kid is actually struggling with something that the parent or not even the school teachers can identify. So we have that covered. So it's youth development, it's counseling, it's just a full circle, and it's gonna take us as a community, right? Because sometimes we're in a space where we feel like, well, this didn't work, that didn't work. But let's get away from that narrative, right? So now we're not talking about it, we're gonna be about it. But in order for us, right, to help our community, we have to work as a team. So whatever assistance that we can get on that end, just making sure that we're all coming together and we're all playing our roles, and just don't give up. Don't look at it as just, oh, this is just another initiative. This is just a way for money to come to the city and it's not going to help the community. This right here is the greater good for the community, but it's going to take us to come together. And right now, our voice, this is the opportunity for our voices to be heard. You have someone on this call that's from the city, from the mayor's office. They're here now to hear our voice. So at this point, our voice counts, right? And so together, we're going to make a difference in our city. We're going to take our city back.
Love it. Thank you, Tanise. Thank you. And what it says to me, too, is that we, as an us, need to change our language around this. Public health crisis is a new framing and understanding that is new, but we all have to adapt that understanding that this is what it is, and what we've been calling it before did not work for us coming up with the real solution. So I'm just really putting it before us that what you've heard tonight in terms of how we classify this is on target, and we need to take ownership of it ourselves and use that language when we talk about violence at this point, and when we refer to us as this community. Thank you, Tanise. Mr. Ernest, what do you want us to really grasp onto when we hear this?
So one is sort of, for me, when I got involved, and this is not something that happened overnight, right? So me personally, I've been in meetings with the folks that have been identified on this call with us for about 6 months now. We have been planning and having meetings and, really digging into the core of what Dr. Jen just presented to you all. So, and one thing that I've learned to entrust in and believe in, sort of like the Ubuntu philosophy, right? Is, it's I am because we are. It's us in this together. And to entrust in the belief of all of my colleagues that I've been working on with this, and being intentional about it's community based, right? Most times you work with a lot of institutions and they feel like they have all the answers, right? Considering these doctors that I'm working with, right? But they really understand that it's going to take the community to get involved at every level, right? To get this done, right, and to make this successful. And everyone has been very intentional about their thoughts and respect about their time and the steps that we take, because we're talking about sustainability longer than any particular political tenure, right? We're trying to build an infrastructure around a crisis, right? And when you talk about crisis, what we're trying to do from a community level is to amplify that it's a crisis and how are we responding to it, right? Most times when you have a crisis, we respond to it in a way that everybody's getting noticed, right? Everybody's trying to do something about it. So what we're trying to do is to get everyone engaged or around this issue and amplify their voices and get them active in some kind of way, right? To alleviate the poverty, not only alleviate the violence, but alleviate the poverty and a number of things that have came up that causes violence, right? So it's been a very exciting journey to get where we are today. And I'm excited that we are continuing to have these conversations and through the leadership of not only Dr. Jen, but the other doctors that are on in the city government of Jonathan Henderson that has been pushing to move us in this direction to get where we are. So my ask, and that's what I'm excited about, my ask is that, that we may have some actions at the end of this call, but how do we get everybody engaged in amplifying this message to the community or to your neighbor? Because we never know when violence may occur or what neighborhood it might occur in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Ernest. So through putting this together and all that you all have worked on to create just a new understanding of how we tackle violence in our community, there are some preventative measures that you put into place or putting into place, and some intervention measures. Can anybody, one of you, one of our guest panelists, talk about those things, the preventative measures and the interventions that you are putting in place through programming and whatnot?
I mean, I think we're really scratching the surface, right? We say prevention, that is so incredibly broad, and it can be everything from an after-school program that serves 10 kids to our Thrive Kids program, which is mental health support directly in schools, which serves thousands of kids, right? So, and some of them's going to work and some of them aren't going to work. I'll defer to Ernest to talk about maybe our violence interruption, and Tanise talk about how Feed the Second Line, the work that you all are doing, because that is really preventative work. But I'll just say that the economic stability piece of it, and again, that's what I said, this is what keeps me up at night, because there's so much more we need to be doing. We economic and food insecurity, I'll take those both together. We were able to get the city to agree to give $6 million, $5 million for economic stability and $1 million for food security. And we released a notice of funding availability, which basically says, any community organization, any organization, come and give us a proposal for how you would address, for example, food insecurity, which we know is such a core issue in our city and has a role to play in prevention. If you are hungry and you don't have your basic needs met, your risk of being a victim of violence or having to fall into that is very high. So when we designed it, we asked the programs, 50% of it has to go directly to people. That's 50% of the money has to be directly to them. Yes, you need staff to run programs, and we understand that. And so we ended up awarding 4 very different but great programs. One is Sankofa, which many of you, if you're in the lower 9th ward, to make a significant investment to have them increase their ability to have their healthy food available in that community and the store that they're doing, to Second Harvest, to increase their ability to serve and to sign people up for SNAP benefits, because there's a lot of people who are eligible for benefits that could provide them with needed services, and they don't realize it, and they don't know. Our economic security notice of funding availability is actually going on right now. And again, the goal with that $5 million is to serve at least 2,500 people. And so we're looking at a variety of things. Maybe it's a guaranteed basic income program. There's a pilot that's going on at Rooted School. And I know because my son went to Rooted, that gives high school students $50 a week, and it transforms their ability to take care of what they need to take care of. So whether it's a guaranteed basic income, whether it's building your credit so that you can get that thing you need to get to the next step, or very, minimal financial literacy or asset repair or all of that. And so we are really excited about seeing what the programs are, measuring the outcomes, and then being able to make the case to say, okay, these really worked, so let's keep funding them even when the ARPA money runs out. So I don't know, Tanise or Ernest, do you want to talk about some of the other programs?
Yeah, and so Pastor, I will, follow Jen in saying that the things that she are talking about, our overall goal is to eradicate poverty per se, right? And we sort of have mapped out specific communities that live below the poverty rate or right at it, right? So we want to, from a community standpoint, we want to be very intentional about those communities to ensure them that the services that she's talking about, that those kids get, like the summer jobs, right? That those kids get the summer job. Or if there's blight in that particular community, right? And then listen to the city council about the darkness, right? That tends to be in a lot of communities. How do we make it more lighter, right? So it's like being very intentional about those specific communities and addressing that and doing an intensive outreach around, even if we have to do conflict mediation. And as we said, we want to start like a front door delivery with these services, right? So ensure that those particular communities definitely have the opportunity to do so. And if it has to be one house at a time in that particular target area, that's what we want to do. Go from house to house in the target neighborhoods, and hopefully as we continue to grow, to expand that across the city. And I will add that I met Tanise through this relationship with another doctor that's been working on this with us, Dr. DeWolf. And so we were excited to have them come in, and I'll let her talk about it a little bit more. But the work that we're doing with the cultural barriers and ensuring that they be part of this is being expedited a little quicker, right? Because of city government. But we're trying to take this ground approach and the hospital approach and the ecosystem approach and try to marry them in a way that they are both working simultaneously, and that we'll continue to doing the work, and that we all meet at some point with the same message and the same deliverance for the community that we're working with.
Absolutely. One voice, one sound. But listen, Ernest, before I move to Tanise, though, I do want you to say a word about the violence interrupter initiative that you all are putting in place. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's part of that same ecosystem as they have identified. We are just the community aspect of it, and what we're trying to do is hire a number of violence interrupters in the specific communities. We have sent out our hiring process and application for folks to sign up to do so. And with those folks, they will be responsible for those target communities that we have identified and do the service that we have talked about to ensure that, like, we're doing outreach, we're bringing awareness, we are part of the gun lock safety, right? There's another program that they have that we hope to redevelop, Stop the Bleed. And just, and connecting them with the trauma center and the mental health aspect of it, and try to create the sort of the service that they may get in the hospital if it's there, and connecting those together so that they can integrate, so that the trauma service, the trauma service that they would get at the hospital, we want that to bleed off into the hospital, right? I mean, bleed off into the community, that it becomes peer to peer. So if you have experienced it, you're able to talk to your neighbor or your family about this experience and where you can get this service at, right? And eventually try to have community hubs in those specific communities, right, to identify trauma and to use it as a prevention if anyone is experiencing it in your family or in your community. And when you change like the blight and give people jobs and handle it like a crisis, they will be responsible for amplifying that in their community and getting people on board.
And I just want to say, because you and I have talked about this, these jobs aren't just, run-of-the-mill jobs. These are jobs that are giving people some opportunity to create generational wealth and get out of a system of poverty that they've been in maybe for generations. So they're good jobs with benefits and a good salary, right?
Correct. So, so they ensured everyone at the table said, we want to start with those who are employed, that make them and give them a decent salary, because it's, and also that the workers will have the opportunity to get the same service that, the people who may have experienced violence. So it's trauma informed through the Trauma Recovery Center, right? There's healing sessions for also the workers also, so that they don't get burnt out and get caught up in the midst of what's going on and not be able to do their job effectively. So the same type of service that we're talking about giving to the community, I have experienced it personally with the staff and people I work with, right? They are very intentional about coming from a trauma-informed mental health perspective, that we are taking care of each other, right? Like, it's not a whole lot of, there's some disagreements to a certain degree, but everybody is cautioned about what we're trying to do so that we can be healthy to provide the service and work together in a way that's authentic, and not, have the bickering or, saying who has the power and who doesn't have the power.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ernest. Tanise, can you tell us a little bit about what your organization is doing, Feed the Second Line, in the areas of prevention and intervention?
Yes. Also just standing on the front lines in the fight to take our communities back. But I'll just touch, because Dr. Vegano and Mr. Ernest did such a great job on touching upon everything else, that it didn't leave me room for anything. However, I will say this from a culture bearer standpoint. If you think about it, Mr. Ernest said mapping out and targeting certain neighborhoods, right, to start with. Well, 9 times out of 10, there's either a masking Indian tribe that comes out from that group, from that neighborhood, or a second line group that comes out from that neighborhood. So just getting the culture bearers, on the path of, okay, when you think about it, a second line, the entire community supports that second line group, right? So now here's the way for the second line to use the second line group or the tribe or whatever entity of the culture that is, for them to actually now use that platform for you to be able to give back to the community that supports you, because they are the familiar faces. Everybody know in this neighborhood, this big chief comes out, this person is in his tribe. So actually that big chief and his tribe members, letting it be known to the community members in that community, like, we are in this fight together. Here's what we can do. I'm a relatable face. You can talk to me. I actually know this kid that may be doing X, Y, Z, because I've been knowing him since he was a little boy. So now I have the opportunity to be able to have that one-on-one conversation with them. So, and also just with this NOLA Full Circle initiative, Feed the Second Line also using our platform. It's just as an organization that's just pretty much on the front line and just head first for the community. So we have built a great reputation within the community. So a lot of people come to us. A lot of those culture bears are experiencing that same trauma as well. So just getting involved and being on the front lines and also positioning our culture bears to actually making sure that they're taking a stand for their said community as well.
Wow. Wow. That's phenomenal. It just reminds me, I mean, just brings to my mind that there was a time when we knew that everybody in the community mattered, and making sure that we took care of one another, that we raised up our children where everybody was engaged, from the school to the police officers that walked the beat and were involved in the neighborhoods to the, everybody sitting on their porch watching out for one another. And we're realizing now that we got to return back to that time when crime was lower and violence was lower, to get back to that place again and kind of restore what we had. So thank you again. It's that us mentality. Last question before we move to the participants tonight. Everybody is really going to be interested in funding. Dr. Vegno, you indicated and alluded to this, that there are other cities that are putting much more resources financially into the alleviation of poverty and also tackling violence, and New Orleans has done historically. And now we have funds that are accessible to us. Talk a little bit. You mentioned the ARP funding. Is that, am I saying that right? I'm getting that confused now with IRA and
No,
ARP.
that's right. American Rescue Plan. Yep.
Yeah. So there's that. There's philanthropic organizations. But how is that going to be sustainable over time? How are we going to get to the next level? As you said, we only got to take that higher. So talk a little bit about funding, if you would.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that has really doomed a lot of this in the past, is that it was a grant here and a grant there, or philanthropy, but it was only for this purpose. And it just, nothing, you can't grant your way out of violence. So right now, when we did our deep dive and made the case for cities, the high performing cities are investing anywhere between $20 and $60 per capita in this funding. And that's not every city. That is certain cities. But that's who we want to be like. When we add up this one-time American Rescue Plan funding and the grants, and then, the city has increased its investment, which is exciting, and all the other sources, we're doing okay. Back of the envelope math, we're probably, for the next few years, maybe around $20 to $30 per capita. I think we should be at the high end of that. But American Rescue Plan funds have to be expended by 2026. So we see this as we've got 3 years to make the case to continue this funding. I think we'll always need some grants. I think we will always need philanthropy, but we can't count on them as the backbone. I think that if we as a city identify this as a priority, just like we identified early childhood as a priority, then we got to pay for it. And either we figure out a way, in an ideal world, we would have so much law enforcement savings that we could reinvest into prevention. I don't know that we can get there in 3 years. I hope we can, but we've got to steadily make the case that, number one, first and foremost, this is working in our community. So we want to fund what works. And number two, that we have to work with our decision makers who control the budget to reorganize the budget to support these priorities. So our job at the health department in the next 3 years is to just constantly sound this drumbeat with our partners that we're doing this, it's working, here's the evidence that it's working. And I think if we can show that, we are going to make headway in sustainability. And I think we're already capturing some attention nationally. We have some national philanthropic organizations that are really interested in what we're doing and the way we're building the ecosystem, that have the potential to to really be a big force in getting us to that sustainability. So I will be looking to all of our friends on the call that we work with to say, please, will you come with us to City Council and present the great report that Ubuntu is doing, or that Feed the Second Line is doing with NOLA Full Circle, or that CRA is doing in our school. So I'm just saying you've been warned, but that's what we need to do.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Avegno. Tanis or Ernest, did you have anything to add to that in terms of funding?
Ditto to everything Dr. Avegno said, but also as far as this initiative, NOLA Full Circle, part of what we want to do from Feed the Second Line side is also just to help raise funding to go towards the initiative as well. Like, we understand, like, we need the funding, and so just putting things in place while creating jobs for the culture bearers to actually help raise that funding so it can go towards our initiative, so we can be more sustainable. I mean, everything counts.
All right. Thank you, Tanis. Mr. Ernest?
No comment.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to questions then. Thank you, panelists. We're going to take some time to hear questions from our participants on the call tonight. I don't know who from my side is handling those questions. Kiana, I think Valerie had to go.
Okay. I have one. Okay, yeah. Pastor, I don't see no question in the chat, but I see Miss Betty. Miss Betty have her hand up. And then I have a question after Miss Betty.
All right, go ahead, Betty.
Go ahead, Betty.
Thank you. Thank you all for this fabulous presentation. And I thank Ernest. I'm a board member of Ubuntu, so I am a huge supporter of Ernest, Mr. J, for sure. But I tell you where my concern is. I volunteered before Katrina in one of the public schools with a group of my African-American friends. My partner and I were the only white folks that were in the project. But one of the things that I discovered was that you cannot do this work without being in a neighborhood school with families, with neighbors, with teachers, with administrators, with the bus drivers. Our charter school system is not allowing that thing. We don't have community schools any longer. So I feel like, I mean, I love everything you guys are doing in the youth development piece of it. I'm aware of the Thrive Kids. I'm aware of Troy's work. But my concern is that nobody who is telling the charters that there are things that they are going to have to start doing, because they are some of our education systems, I'm not going to say all of them, but some of our education systems are the problem here. So I'm curious to hear from, I mean, I beat poor Ernest over the head with this all the time, but I would love to hear from Tanis and Dr. Avegno about what is happening right now that becomes a part of all the work you guys are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Betty. That was a great question. And my background is education, and I actually spent the last 11 years working at a charter school here in the community. So I definitely agree, and I definitely understand, and I experienced it firsthand. So what we're trying to do with this NOLA Full Circle initiative is actually we're going out into the schools and actually partnering with the schools. So the same way we'll have violence interrupters like on the ground, also working it out, making sure obviously everyone's cleared of background check and things of that nature, but to actually start partnering with the local schools and actually bringing those violence interrupters in, to actually have someone in the school that the students can actually talk to and relate to, and we can actually hear the students' concerns in firsthand from their voice, because it's different when you hear it from their parents, from what we see in the media. But the children, like the things that they say are so powerful. So we're gonna start there, like we said, like we're just getting started, but we're actually starting off with the schools that, you know, we have personal relationships with, right? To start there and then create that pilot, create that model. And the plan is to continue to expand. So it's a start. But the fact of the matter is, like, we're starting. So yes, it's definitely on the radar, and it's definitely something that we want to address. And soon, like, we'll have things in position, I'm sure, where we will be able to bring in the experts as well, to address those needs, how they need to be addressed.
And I would say too, I just want to just jump in there real quick before we move to the next question, or anybody from our panelists that want to jump in there, that in terms of prevention, we've got to look at the curriculum of charter schools too. If we want to really talk about the eradication of poverty, we need to look at the curriculum of these schools and make sure they are really teaching our children about the financial aspects of their lives and how to handle finances in their lives and how to build generational wealth in their life. These are things that our private schools are teaching young people from a very young age that our charter schools are not. And that has to be a part of the discussion as well, too, in my opinion. Any other panelists?
Okay. Next,
Valerie, hold on just a second.
I think it was Dr. Bernier.
Yeah. Mr. Ernst or Dr. Vegno, did you want to respond to Betty's question or comment?
Yeah, I will just say that it's far from ideal that we have such a decentralized school system. However, you know, we've met with them several times to just talk about violence prevention strategies and kind of explain the direction we were trying to go and the using of the ARPA money and Thrive Kids and all that. And they are hungry for it. The charter school operators that I talk to, they are really wanting to play a part. And even if they have slightly different ways of doing it in systems, and that does make it a bit challenging, the Thrive Kids program alone, and that's just one program. We've had trauma-informed schools programs for years that are aiming to reduce, I think somebody put in the chat, reduce suspensions and have different ways of, you know, developing relationships and dealing with issues in schools. But Thrive Kids in particular has been incredibly well received. Nobody has said, oh, I don't want you to come because I want to do it this way. So I think they get it. It's just we have to work a little bit harder to make sure that the experience for all kids is standard.
Absolutely. Okay. Let's move on to our next question. Valerie, you have another question?
Yes. Yes. I have a question about like the parents of the children. I know some parents, they work 2 and 3 jobs, and therefore they need assistance with a child or with a children, to keep them or to monitor them, or are you all connected with like to keep them in their own community, keep them in their own neighborhoods? Are you all connected with the neighborhood association, or can y'all find a neighborhood association for that if family can have assistance from their own neighborhood? Because sometimes.
Valerie, I think, did I lose you or did we all lose you? Hello?
We all lost her.
We all lost it.
All right. Valerie, you there? All right. I don't know if you got the gist of that, Dr. Vegno, or Tanise, or Ernest. Are you? But what I heard is, are you enlisting the help of organizations like neighborhood associations, maybe social and pleasure clubs? I don't know, and I assume that's all part of the ecosystem.
Well, I'll speak from our side of it. And I wish she was here on the call so I can say that's why it's very critical for the community to be on these calls and our voices to be heard, because that is an issue, right? And when you think about everything that's going on, everything that we're trying to tackle and address, like that's like something that may have went over people's head, but that's also something that we can take and put into this ecosystem, a full circle, and see what we can do. And that may not be something on the higher level, but it may just be something like, I remember growing up, it's not the same no more, but I was what you would call a latchkey kid, right? I had to let myself inside the house and go inside and not come outside. And if I attempted to come outside, my next door neighbor, the neighbor across the street, like Miss Gloria is gonna say, get your butt back inside. Your mom is not home. And well, since you're being sneaky, come down here. And it was understood that if my mama came home, yes, I was gonna get in trouble because I shouldn't have came outside. But knowing that I was in the care of Miss Gloria, that I was in a safe space. And I feel like we don't have that anymore. So maybe something collectively as a community, those are the things that we may need to start on the front end, like to take care of each other. Like that's community. Like that's what it is. I don't know if Dr. Vegano or Mr. Ernest have anything to say in regards to that.
No, I agree. I think the neighborhood associations are a good idea. I hadn't specifically thought about them, although, faith-based is another big area. And I know Ernest and Dr. Vaughn, who's on here, we are trying to work with as many faith groups as possible, because every church might have some program that, even if it only serves 5 to 10 people, if they could serve 15 if they needed to. Most churches know when there's families are having issues and can help mediate in a way, in a different way than the interrupters, but in a similar way. But yeah, one of the initiatives that we are bringing that we didn't talk to is based on a model out of Omaha. And everybody says, well, Omaha ain't New Orleans, but it has nothing to do with the city. It is a regular forum weekly in which churches and community organizations and social aid and pleasure clubs and business leaders can hold accountable law enforcement and other city departments, and together raise concerns and talk about what's going on in this area, that area, and who's got the solution. And so real community engagement and buy-in that everybody commits to doing weekly, not just like, oh, well, let's just have a meeting and show up and everybody talk and then we're fine, but with real results and real movement. And so I think as many sectors as we can bring in, the better we're going to be.
Absolutely. Thank you both. And listen, we're going to... Yes, Valerie.
Yeah, Pastor Man, I don't see nobody else.
All right, we'll leave it there then. Let me say this. I'm going to give our panelists just maybe give us a 1-minute closing thought. If you want to give us contact information so that people can plug into those job opportunities or get more information, that'd be excellent. But let's start with you, Tanise, if you want to just leave us with a closing.
Yes. First of all, I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be able to speak on the panel and engage with you all in the community. With our partnership in NOLA Full Circle, you guys can go to nolafullcircle.org. You can also see the things that we will be doing within the community. And also on the other side of that, like, there's a place where you can become a monthly supporter, and it doesn't have to just be community members. It can be if you know someone who has a local business, because whether it's just as little as $5 a month, that money goes back into community. That money is able to help us to raise funds and to be on the grounds doing these campaigns and just getting the word out. So, I mean, we said it once before, we're better together. It's time for the community to come together and take a stand. And it is an ecosystem and we're all a partnership. And like Mr. Ernest said, now it's time to, and like you said, start using those words like public health crisis. Let's change the language, trust in each other, and believe in this, and knowing that we're all better together. It doesn't matter if you're a doctor, or it doesn't matter if you're a stay-at-home mom. We are all oneness with the purpose in this community. And so let's all do the greater good for our city.
All right. Thank you, Tanise. Appreciate all that you're doing and for being here tonight and taking your time. Thank you for just continuing to make this a better community. Dr. Avegno, closing.
Well, thanks. That's hard to follow. I will say that I am a regular Feed the Second Line monthly contributor. And I'm excited and proud to do it because I know all of the ways and spaces that you all are, and with culture at the core. And it makes me so happy. But yeah, I think continue to ask us for us, me representing the government side of things. I want to make sure we are being accountable, that everybody knows what we're doing. There will be opportunities for community feedback on some of the programs. In particular, our Violence Interruption and Trauma Recovery Center is going to have a community advisory board so that we really understand how we're affecting people. We want you to know how we're spending the money, where the money is going, what the outcomes are. Nobody loves a good report or chart or graph more than I do. But we want our citizens to not give up. And we want you to be engaged to the point where you are holding us to account for what we're doing and you see the results. We don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. We want to be honest with you. It's going to be challenges. We'll have bumps along the way, but please don't give up. And please, if you think that maybe we should be doing something different, we want you to know. And everybody should apply. Everybody looking for a job should apply to work with Ernest and be a violence interrupter. Where the hospital team is fully hired and are beginning trainings, which is really excited. And again, they're going to be working hand in hand with the community team. This is a difficult job, but it is a really rewarding one. It is the chance to directly change some lives. So I hope y'all will pass along those job openings to your interested friends and neighbors.
Thank you, Dr. Avegno. We appreciate all that you're doing, and especially appreciate you being here tonight and sharing with us all this incredible work that's now being done. Mr. J, tell us, give us some closing thoughts as we begin to close.
Yeah, I think they've said for the most part, so I appreciate, giving us this opportunity. I want to especially thank Tanise and Dr. Avegno. She's had a really long day. She's been at City Council, multiple meetings, and she took the time out to come spend with us. So I want to thank her and my other colleagues who are on the phone who may have left. And we are going to be reaching back out to you all to support in some type of way to amplify this issue. So thank you.
All right, Mr. Ernest, thank you for all that you're doing in Ubuntu Village. And where can folk get a hold of you?
Me?
Yes.
Y'all see me all the time. My office is next door to yours, so we will be talking.
All right, everybody. With that said, let's we always end with some closing announcements. If anybody has anything that we as a community can get engaged in to support and walk in solidarity with, please let us know at this time. Any events that we need to be made aware of? Any announcements? Yes.
I do. Ubuntu Village NOLA is having our big event for the year on December 9th, and I will actually see if I can't get it sent out on our email blast to let people know about it. But it's December 9th at Capulet, and anybody wants to know about it, they can get in touch with me.
Right. Ubuntu Village's annual gala, right?
Yes.
Right. Very good. Thank you, Betty. Any other announcements? All right, everybody. Hearing none at this time, and I trust that there are no candidates that are going to be on this November 14th ballot are in the room. If they are, they always get the opportunity to speak. But remember to go out and vote on November the 14th. We still have some important initiatives to vote on. and amendments, I think, that are going to be on there, and also some candidates too. So with that said, let's go ahead and close this discussion tonight with a word of prayer, as we always do at Justice and Beyond. Let's take a moment, ground yourself wherever you are, realizing that you are part of the solution and that together we can tackle this. So God, we give you thanks and praise for what we've heard. What has been poured into our spirit tonight. God, we pray that it would be a motivator, that it would be an inspiration to us to realize that we're coming together like never before, and that this is a historic opportunity where community awareness and federal funding and new innovation, and us looking at what other cities are doing, and awareness of all public officials and community organizations are all converging at one time. And we thank you that this is happening. And we just believe together that things are changing even now as we speak, and that they're going to get better for the sake of families, for the sake of children, for the sake of our whole city and our nation. So use us in ways that we all can be a part of the solution. We thank you, oh God, for this opportunity to be together in this space on tonight. Keep us safe as we go different directions, that no hurt, harm, or danger would come to us. We ask this in the name of Almighty God and my Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Thank you, everybody. God bless you. Thank you, panelists, for being here tonight. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Everybody.